Good evening and welcome to the 2022 pre-town meeting information session. I'm your town administrator, Matt Hanson. Thank you for joining us this evening. Here with us, we do have two members of our Board of Selectmen as well. I'd like to acknowledge our chairman, Ron Cohane, and Eric Eldridge, our vice chair. We also have a number of staff here with us this evening who can help answer questions you may have. We have Colin Loisel, our assistant town administrator, Dr. Michael Flanagan, our superintendent, Eric Solana, our town planner and economic development director. We have Wes Russell and Pat Sands, our fire chief and assistant fire chief, respectively. And thank you to the residents who are here in attendance this evening. I understand we're live streaming on Facebook, so welcome to the people at home and the people who are watching on video on demand. So for those of you who aren't familiar with a pre-town meeting information session, I very want to briefly, take a moment to explain why we have this meeting. This is not an opportunity for debate. This is really an informational presentation followed by a question and answer period. So the purpose of tonight is to help explain the articles, answer questions, to help better prepare residents going into town meeting. So when you are having your discussions and debates and deliberations at town meeting, they can hopefully be more fruitful and we can spend more time just doing those discussions and debates at town meeting because we've answered questions here ahead of time, as many as we can. So again, thank you for the residents who've come to ask questions this evening. To start, I'll run through the first 5 articles of the evening, which will be special town meeting warrant articles addressing items for this fiscal year, this budget. In the past, we've done special town meeting articles in the middle of our town meeting. We've broke town meeting and gone back and forth. This year, the moderator has chosen to start the annual and special town meeting with the special town meeting warrant articles first. The first article is a transfer of accrued interest to the sewer department. So the sewer department is seeking authorization from town meeting to transfer interest in the amount of $159,000 from the general fund to the sewer department's enterprise fund. These funds were collected as part of a litigation, and a vote of town meeting is required to formally transfer the funds back to the sewer department. So, any questions on Article 1? All right, seeing none. Article 2 is one more transfer of funds back to the sewer department. Several years ago, the sewer department purchased a Ford F-250 for their department out of the sewer enterprise, and recently that vehicle was surplused because it reached its end of life. Through the surplus auction, those receipts come in to the general fund, and the only way to get them back to the enterprise is by a transfer at town meeting. So we are just looking for a simple majority vote at the town meeting to transfer the funds of that surplus vehicle back into the enterprise fund. All right, great. Article 3 is a list of several different transfers of funds, and we have the funding source as well as the account that's going to. Several of these are annual articles. We have $300,000 from free cash going to the snow and ice deficit. That account typically is deficit spent somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000, but we don't know on any given year. It really depends on how many storms we have, how many of those storms are on a weekend and require overtime, etc. So there's typically some balance at the end of the year, and annually it's covered through free cash. Another annual article is a transfer of free cash for a Medicaid reimbursement back to the school department. Again, this is a factor of that funding coming into the town. We have an anticipated budgeted amount, and once we know the actual amount and it's received, we transfer that back to the school department because it's part of their planned budget for the year. And then also, we had planned earlier in the year to provide some of the funding from our cannabis host community agreements to the school department for health department staffing and programming, and that funding didn't get in at the annual town meeting, so we just want to make sure that before this fiscal year closes, we can transfer that $65,000 to the school department to fully fund those programs for fiscal year 22. These transfers will just require a simple majority at town meeting. Any questions? Great, thank you. Another annual article is the approval of several prior year bills. Sometimes bills get missed, lost in the mail, whatever may have happened. If a bill comes in after we close our fiscal year, it requires a special vote of town meeting to pay that bill out of a different fiscal year. So these are legitimate purchases. There's just one reason or another why the bill may be paid late. So in these cases, these were fiscal year 21 expenses, and we're just looking for permission from town meeting to cover them within our existing fiscal year 22 operating budget. They range from $300 to $500, some printing costs, and some sprinkler inspection invoices. Any questions? Yes.
On a sprinkler, ASAP sprinkler, is that outdoor sprinklers or indoor sprinklers?
Indoor sprinklers. We have to do annual inspections in all of our buildings that have sprinklers. These two came to Old Town Hall, to the rec department, so it would either have been Old Town Hall, First Parish, or the rec building. I can get you the exact buildings if you'd like. I didn't bring a copy of those bills this evening. Sorry, guys. Any other questions? Free cash appropriations. These, Article 5 is part of our fiscal year 23 capital improvement plan. We put this article in the special town meeting this year so we can expend this money as soon as town meeting is complete, May 3rd. Typically, our fiscal year capital improvement plan is done in the annual town meeting, but then you can't purchase any items until after July 1st, which is the start of our fiscal year. So this year, to save time, town meeting's a little bit earlier. It behooved us to put this in the special. We have $345,000 worth of capital expenditures. We do have a few members of our Capital Asset Management Committee here. If anyone has any questions, I'll just run through them quickly, though. Item 1 from the fire department is replacing 6 of their air packs for a cost of $55,000. The police department has a taser replacement project, a total cost of $18,600. Large server replacement for town hall and most of our general government, $67,000 for the IT department. Another $14,000 for the IT department to replace network equipment. $71,000 to replace a 1-ton utility truck at the highway department. $67,000 for various building maintenance items at the police department. To replace the building commissioner's vehicle in the building department, that's $35,000. And supplemental funding to cover the anticipated difference in cost between some previously appropriated capital funding for a 6-wheel dump truck. We just need an additional $17,739 to complete that purchase, in addition to what's already been authorized. Any questions on any of those items? Yes, Gus?
Item 1, fire department. Does each firefighter have his own self-defeating apparatus?
I'm going to ask our fire chief to come on up. He took the effort to come here this evening. Wes Russell, thank you for coming.
Thanks. The firefighters have their own mask. This, not the whole pack. So we have packs that are positioned in the apparatus, but each firefighter has their own mask to go with it.
I would suggest that they consider providing each firefighter with their own self-contained breathing apparatus.
Yeah, that's not how most departments run, because they are able, we used to actually share masks as well. We have, in fact, we actually are applying for a grant to replace these SCBAs, and then we won't have to expend the money if we get it. And we were authorized, based on our apparatus riding positions, for 24 packs by FEMA and the National Fire Administration. I did have one question on this myself, because we're actually replacing more than 6, right? Is that?
Yeah, so there's actually 12. There's 6 that are being funded out of this, and then 6 out of our ARPA.
Right.
It's very important that the fire department have the proper breathing apparatus.
Yeah, I think working with Capital Asset, I think we have a good plan in place. If we get the grant, we'll be able to replace all 24. And if we don't, we have a plan to replace so many over every couple of years so that we keep up to date.
Pressure.
Oh, yes, yeah. You should see them these days. We'll show you one. They're all bells and whistles.
Any other question on this piece of the capital plan, which, as was noted, you'll see the capital plan a few times throughout the presentation from various funding sources that ultimately make up the totality of the plan. No other questions? Great, thank you. That will be the last special town meeting warrant article. Article 1 of the annual town meeting is the reports of town officers and committees. We have an electronic copy available on the town website, and we have hard copies available at the office of the Town Administrator and Board of Selectmen at Town Hall. Do we have some at the library as well? We usually leave a box down there. So a few different places in Town Hall you can pick up a hard copy if you'd like. Article 2 are general fund appropriations for fiscal year 23. We have the budget attached as Exhibit A. Actually, do we Thank you. So if you're here this evening or you're checking on the town's website, under the important documents, we have a full listing of our annual town operating budget. A few items to note, some additional funding going into stabilization and a few new positions that we're funding this year. I won't go through every single line item here, but the way our budget is approved at town meeting is it's a bottom line for salaries and a bottom line for expenses for each department. So I'm going to just bring you through the main highlights that have changed from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23. If you have any other additional questions, please let us know. Under elections and registrations, you'll see an increase there. That's just based on the number of elections we have each year. So the town clerk recommends a budget that's either up or down, strictly based on the number of elections. You'll see some changes between the conservation, planning, and zoning board salary line items. One employee who is the land use department coordinator was being paid out of several different department accounts. We've just consolidated those under the planning board account, changed her title to land use administrator, but she still has all the same job responsibilities. It's purely for administrative purposes. We have budgeted an additional $12,000 in our public buildings and properties accounts due to expected utility increases. I'm sure everyone's aware of what's been going on in the utility market recently. Our IT budget is increasing slightly. For the past few years, the PEG department, our media department that's filming here this evening, was subsidizing 25% of the IT director's salary because of the heavier role that position used to have in that department, but we've been phasing that out over the last few years, so this is the last portion of that phase out. So the IT director's salary moving forward will be 100% funded within the operating budget. Okay. The police department, you'll see a somewhat sizable increase this year, but thankfully we're restoring one position that was lost last year. Police lieutenant retired at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and due to the budget uncertainty, we left that position unfilled for a year. Things have somewhat settled. We don't, of course, have a crystal ball for the future, but we were able to restore that position in the budget this year. Again, it was only a position we lost for 1 year and restored it. So it may appear as a new position, but to the police department, it's just bringing them back up to their level service. The communication center, our communication dispatchers have unionized with their own union for the first time, and as part of that, they had their own collective bargaining process and a new contract, and the comps did have them quite a bit under their peers in the region, in Littleton and Groton, et cetera. So we did offer some salary increases to make them commensurate with their peers. The SRO program is seeing a reduction. We're not actually reducing the number of police officers in the school resource officer program. That just has to do with the salary of the different officers that are being placed or working out of that program at any given time. Different officers with different educational backgrounds or things like that, newer officers that may be at a lower rate of pay, etc. The fire department, in addition to the cost of living adjustments, you'll see $178,000 total department increase. The administration and selectmen recommended budget is recommending 2 additional FTE firefighter positions this year. There is a bit of a delta. The fire department has requested 4 FTE positions. This budget right now is recommending 2 of those 4 positions for funding in fiscal year 23. There's a small reduction in the animal control line item by $13,500. Tyngsborough last year, for the first time in recent history, entered into an IMA with the town of Chelmsford for a shared animal control position, so we're seeing some savings in that line item. The school department has a $594,000 increase, which represents about a 2.7% increase, which is the goal that through the Tri-Board, the Board of Selectmen, the School Committee, and the Finance Committee are targeting for the next 5 years to help meet our long-term budget plans. If people have questions on that, the superintendent, as I noted, is here this evening. The highway department, thankfully, has restored 1 skilled laborer position that they lost nearly 20 years ago. They actually lost several positions. They're still down 1 position, but with this restoration, it gets them a little bit closer to where they were in the early 2000s. A little hard to believe, I know we've certainly added a number of roads that are now accepted as public ways. We've added a number of town properties and expanded some of our green spaces. So the workload they have has certainly been increasing, at least the last 7 years I've been here. So to get that one position back, we're hoping will also offset some of our costs to hire contractors in the winter for overtime for plowing and things like that. So there certainly will be some cost savings. We don't have an exact dollar amount, but some of that will offset some funding we're spending right now for private contractors.
Could you explain that snow and ice, for snow removal,
Mm-hmm.
you got $250,000.
Yes.
There's a state law that says that can be overridden.
Yes. So this is one line item that the town is able to overexpend during the fiscal year without town meeting appropriation. We do have to come back and reappropriate and make the account whole at some point in the future, but because the state recognizes that towns can't predict the weather, they allow us to overexpend that. The reason we leave that number at $250,000, even though the average winter usually costs closer to $350,000 to $500,000, is because once you increase that number, the state does not let you decrease it again. They don't want communities arbitrarily decreasing it to help balance the budget, knowing that they can fix it later. So once you increase it, you really can't go back. We did have, probably about 5 years ago, we had a very light winter. We came in very close to the $250,000. So it really is more that bottom tier. Does that answer your question, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Pardon me. All right, one skilled laborer. Small increase in our solid waste and recycling contract, contractual services. The library, we have a plan with the library department. They lost their assistant library director position over 10 years ago. They came to us a few years ago with a plan to try and add a few hours in the budget. We added about $8,000 towards the position in the budget, with hopefully the plan of phasing it in over time, so we didn't get hit with the full cost up front. We're putting another $24,000 towards that position this year, and hopefully by next year, with an additional $24,000, we'll have enough to fully fund an assistant library director position. Field maintenance expenses are going up just due to the cost of watering fields, particularly Bicentennial Field, so that's really a fixed cost increase. You'll see some increases in our debt line items to turn some of our temporary borrowing into permanent borrowing for our last few years of capital plans. And I skipped over the line item, but an additional $50,000 going into road maintenance towards our long-term plan of increasing the amount within the operating budget we fund towards roads. You may have seen a presentation posted on our website recently showing that just to maintain the existing condition of our roads in the town, we should be spending about $1.3 million a year. Anything less than that, and our roads are actually deteriorating and getting more expensive to fix. The state only provides about $430,000 a year in funding. So another $800,000 to $900,000 a year the town really needs to come up with on our own. Thankfully, about $650,000 of that is coming from Cannabis Host Community Agreement funding now, and we've built up, with the fiscal year 23 budget, $250,000 within the operating budget to help meet that goal. Any questions on the budget?
I got a question in reference to communications.
Sure.
I'd say, I don't know, 10 years ago we lost...
Oh, Gus, would you mind?
Oh, I have one here. Is it on?
Speak into it. The green light's on.
Yeah, about 10 years ago or more, we lost power in town, and our 911 system was shut down. What was done to repair that fault with that system at that time?
Sure. So I wasn't here 10 years ago when that happened. My very brief understanding, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Pat or Wes, you may have more experience with this. There is a fail-safe automatic switchover, is my understanding. If our dispatch loses power, our calls will automatically get routed to another center. I'm not sure the location now, if it's back to the state or to Westford.
Westford is the alternate.
Westford? Okay.
And if that would fail, it would go to the state police.
Okay. So Westford is our alternate backup, and our fire chief just noted if that fails, it will go to the state police, probably framing
Because
it.
we did lose it, we didn't have 911 for quite a while that time.
The way the system's set up now, it is addressed. Wes is going to come up and help explain that.
Yeah, there's been some significant advancements in the 911 system, especially over the last 15 years or so. Enhanced 911, cell phone 911. Now you can actually text 911 and get a response. So they've beefed up that system. Things are going from copper lines to fiber. And they have that built-in redundancy. So that system is more stable than we ever thought it would be, you know.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. I'll move on to Article 3. This is the compensation of elected officials. Mostly involves stipended positions, except for the town clerk's position, which is an actual salaried staff position. We're recommending a 2.5% increase for that position, and we are recommending level stipends for the rest of the boards. There was a request from one commission, the sewer commissioners, to increase their stipends back to the, I'll call it the pre-COVID amount, but the other boards, we're requesting their level service. So our recommended budget line item is keeping all the stipended positions the same and a 2.5% increase to the town clerk. Any questions? Great. Article 4 is a transfer of funds to the other post-employment benefits trust fund. This is part of the town's long-term plan to fully fund what is basically retiree health insurance costs, the anticipated future cost to the town for existing employees to cover their retirement health insurance when they retire. An actuarial assessment is done every few years, so there's a small increase actually in the budget to cover that this year. And that lets us know when we're going to meet our funding goal. So the plan is once our pension assessment is paid off, that funding will then get put towards our OPEB trust fund, and eventually we'll have enough money to help offset future retiree health insurance. The reason that this is important is because the rating agencies, the bonding companies, look to see if you have a funding plan in place and if you're funding your plan and what your outstanding liability is. So putting funding away now, even if it's a small amount, and this is a relatively small amount, giving our total liability, we are making progress towards the plan, and we get credit for that when we get rated for our borrowings. Any questions? Great. Article 5 is an appropriation for the Ambulance Enterprise Fund, mostly just level service, budget adjustments here based on salary. The ambulance is funded to employees 24/7, 365 days a year. Any questions on the ambulance budget? Great. Next, we have the Sewer Enterprise Fund budget. This is made up of 3 salaried staff members as well as expenses. This budget has been going up year over year for the last few years as we've built out Sewer Phase 1 and Sewer Phase 2. And happy to report that through some congressionally direct spending, the Sewer Department just received $800,000 through Congresswoman Duran's office and the federal government to fully fund the Phase 3 design work. We're also going to be applying for additional funding towards the Phase 3 construction, but that Phase 3 has not been designed yet. But again, as I noted, that will be fully funded through the federal government. Any questions on the Sewer Enterprise Fund budget? Great. Article 7 is a transfer of PEG funds to support the PEG operating budget. These are your cable and Verizon franchise fees that you see on your bill. It's usually $1, $2, or $3 that goes to support the PEG department. We're looking for $215,479 this year, and that does include replacement of our Castis broadcasting unit, so we can get all of these shows right out to you at home. Any questions regarding the PEG budget? Great. Article 8 is appropriations for the Community Preservation Committee Fund. We have $7,000 towards Lake Muscuppick weed control. We have $275,000 for a town center shared parking lot, open space improvements, ADA trails, and a crypt restoration. This is being matched by a $75,000 state earmark. We have $40,000 we're looking to set aside for a potential walking trail to connect the Winslow School to the existing town hall on Bryant's Lane across some private property, which we're looking to acquire easements across. $50,000 to help with the abatement and cleanup at the existing Winslow School site. 5% is set aside for administrative expenses, and the remaining appropriations are for debt service and reserve accounts.
Question.
Yes.
On a community preservation, many years ago when we signed into that community preservation, many towns did not.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the results that are what are happening today with our community preservation. We have gotten so much property that some of it we didn't pay for at a cent. Mm-hmm. And other towns have been struggling because they did not buy into that community preservation program. So I think that was one good move they made in Tyngsborough with that community preservation program.
And the state has really rewarded communities, if I could take a moment, that are at the 3% surcharge, like Tyngsborough. Very few communities did the full 3%, but you get a higher reimbursement rate now. Most I think all communities at the very beginning were at 100% reimbursement, but as you know, that dropped down to 50% and then close to 30%. With the recent change to the fees charged at the Registry of Deeds, last year our I'll call it the reimbursement rate or the match was, I think, up to around 78%. So we brought in about $1 million total last year between our local 3% and then the state match. So it's significant. The $275,000 project I noted, it's really over a $350,000 project, but it's actually directly across the street from where this is being filmed at the Old Town Hall. If anyone's familiar with the Farwell House property with the bakery, we're here right across from the Tyngsborough Bridge. The town owns a tennis court at the backside of the Winslow School. We received $75,000 from the state towards a shared parking lot at this location that could be used to help boost economic development and recreational activities in the center. And the CPC is funding another portion of that parking lot, as well as a trail network to connect that parking lot down to Winslow Road, where the new Veterans Park is going in, up to the front of the Littlefield Library with some handicap accessible trails, and then a restoration of a crypt, a historic crypt from the late 1700s that you see in this photo here, that to the best of our knowledge and our historical documents that we found was constructed at the request of an Ovid Houston, who was an owner of the tavern at the time in the late 1700s and was reportedly buried here for close to 200 years. So part of this will be restoring the crypt. You can see a brick patio that will be out front, and we're working on some language for a potential plaque to go there and to give a little bit of history of the property and the site and the crypt. It'll be a great little recreational tourist feature in the center of town here. Any other questions on the CPC funding requests? All right, we have several deposits to stabilization funds. The school department is returning $74,000 they received as a turnback from the Valley Collaborative into the Special Ed Stabilization Fund in case it's needed by the department in future years for any unanticipated or unbudgeted special ed costs. Placing $10,000 into the Stormwater Stabilization Fund. This is money that used to be in the general fund that we decided to put into a stabilization fund instead, so it will stay with that department until it's needed. Sizable deposit of $685,000 to our general stabilization fund, which will bring our general stabilization fund up to 7%, which is very, very important when we go to do large borrowings, like we're hoping to do soon, to make sure we have the best bond rating possible. A slight increase in your bond rating can mean savings of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars or more over the life of a loan. And having a sizable stabilization account is very important for our bond rating. We're also looking to put $200,000 towards our road stabilization account. Sorry, any questions on stabilization funds? And when you come to town meeting, which I hope you do, there will be a full listing of our stabilization fund balances and our CPC fund balances in the town meeting finance committee guidebook. Article 10 are appropriations from the stabilization funds. Some stabilization funds we try to never touch, like our general stabilization fund. Some of them are there with the intent that we're going to use them, just maybe not always in the same fiscal year. So we are proposing $800,000 from our road stabilization fund and up to $30,000 from the stormwater stabilization fund if we need it throughout the year for road improvements. All the funding that's going into our road stabilization fund currently is cannabis host community agreement fees. Cannabis excise fees. We receive a 3% excise from our retail store. 75% of that excise funding is going into our road stabilization account to the tune of $600,000 to $800,000 a year. Questions? Article 11 is borrowing for capital improvements for fiscal year 23. We have a total of $181,447.90. $35,000 towards a highway department generator, $35,000 to help match TES, the Elementary School Green Communities Grant Program project, and $111,447.90, which is a portion of the cost of public safety communications upgrades. And again, another portion of that is funded through different funding source. We can get into that in a little bit more detail if there are any questions. Questions on that? Did anyone, Colin, did you want to add anything on these articles? Oh, I did want to note, unless you want to, that while we're doing a new borrowing here, the Capital Asset Management Committee, when considering all of the funding options available, identified $181,000 in previous borrowing capacity that went unused. So we had maybe borrowed $40,000 to purchase a vehicle and only cost $38,000, et cetera. So they did a really good job of combing through our previous borrowings, and we plan on closing those out, but the process to reallocate that money is really a new article to borrow that amount of money. But they did this because they found other money that we ended up not having to use. Borrowing capacity we did not have to use. All right, great. This is a transfer of existing capital funding to fund the fiscal 23 capital improvement plan, similar to the last article where we had some unused borrowing capacity. This was existing capital funding reallocating a total of $91,520 from several projects that have been completed and had funding left over. All right, no questions? Article 13 is establishing a road maintenance revolving account. We've made some changes to our pavement impact fees when people need to install new water lines in the town, if National Grid needs to put in a new gas line or electric line, people have a road opening permit to connect to a utility. There's always a fee associated with that. Rather than having those fees go back to the general fund, we're going to have them go right into the road maintenance revolving account so they can be used for their intended purpose. This is very important. The road opening fees are not very high, but the pavement impact fees, that's a calculation based on the amount of road that you disturb when you have to cut into the road. So a small tie-in in front of your driveway is very small, but I'll use Drake Water, for example. If they replace a water line and an entire stretch of roadway, maybe a half a mile, it's going to be a large impact. It's going to be a large pavement impact fee. The only way we can charge those fees is if we're actually using that funding towards additional road maintenance activities. Really, the only way to do that is to capture that revenue through a revolving account, so we can guarantee, if we're ever challenged, that road pavement impact fee that we collected went right back to road paving activities. If we can't prove that, we can't continue to charge those fees. It would be considered a tax. Any questions? Article 14 is an article to continue to approve our revolving funds. What that really means is we have to establish spending limits. So all of these here now, including the road maintenance, will be added in the previous article, are existing revolving funds. So these are expenditure limits. It doesn't mean we'll necessarily spend this full amount during the course of the fiscal year. It's just a maximum that town meeting is going to allow to be spent out of those accounts. All right, no questions? Authorization for the Board of Selectmen to enter into contracts in excess of 3 years. State law limits the town, the Board of Selectmen, during the fiscal year not to enter into any contracts for more than 3 years unless they have town meeting approval. So this is a blanket approval from town meeting at the beginning of the year to go a little bit longer than state law allows, only up to 5 years and only for supplies and services, office equipment, vehicles, things like that. This is another annual article for those familiar who come regularly to the town meeting. Right. Article 16 is an amendment to the town bylaws regarding the Capital Asset Management Committee. The current bylaw states that only departments requesting an item over $50,000 would be able to apply to the Capital Asset Management Committee for funding. And then there was also a deadline of December 1st for departments to submit their requests. Our department budget requests are typically due at the end of December, so the Capital Committee has lined up their timeline to match with our budget process. And the purpose of reducing the request from $50,000 down to $25,000 was certainly supported by administration and many of the departments in town. The idea is if a capital item or an item replacement is too small, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, you should really put that within your operating budget, or if it's a recurring expense, put it within the operating budget. But so many of our departments are so small, 1 or 2 people, maybe only have a several $1,000 expense line item. There's no way they could even fund something $30,000 or $40,000 within their operating budget. So $25,000 was just a more reasonable limit, but still keeps a reasonable threshold so they're not getting lots of very, very small requests. Anything to add to that, or any questions? All right. Articles 17, 18, and 19 are zoning articles, so I'm going to ask our town planner and economic development director, Eric Salerno, to come and present.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Eric Salerno, town planner. The next 3 articles, as he mentioned, are zoning bylaw amendments. Article 17 has been written with the assistance of town council in order to request town meeting to approve the location of marijuana delivery establishments within the I-1 zoning district in the town of Tyngsborough. This was an important change only because there are 2 new licenses that the Cannabis Control Commission now issues. Those include a marijuana courier and a marijuana delivery operator. Those uses were not defined in the town bylaws, and the town bylaws also included some language that was interpreted as specifically prohibiting delivery. I would like to note that there are 2 articles related to marijuana, Article 17 and Article 18. Article 17 is designed in order to consider the approval of allowing delivery operators and delivery marijuana couriers to locate within the town of Tyngsborough. It's important to note that the Cannabis Control Commission and the state regulations do not allow municipalities to prohibit the delivery of marijuana to locations within their municipality if they allow retail, like Tyngsborough. However, Article 18, if Article 17 doesn't pass, asks the town meeting to consider a prohibition on allowing those 2 types of delivery businesses from locating within town. So if 17 does not pass and 18 does pass, it essentially starts the ball rolling for prohibiting those businesses from locating within Tyngsborough. However, it will not prohibit delivery of marijuana from taking place within the borders of the town. So the town would miss out on the opportunity of the excise tax and other revenues that could be generated from those businesses operating here. I'll go through the 2 articles to show some of the changes. I also prepared a couple of slides to explain some of the nuances of those 2 types of businesses. On this slide, it's showing the marijuana courier definition being added. A marijuana courier essentially is an Uber Eats or a Grubhub of marijuana. It's an entity that doesn't necessarily have to have a physical location. However, in order for them to deliver a product, it must have already been purchased and it must be picked up from a retailer or a medical marijuana treatment center for delivery. They cannot basically be in possession of any materials that haven't already been purchased and should be on the way to a customer who's paid for them. The next page defines the marijuana delivery operator. A delivery operator is a larger type of business. They would have a physical location. They would have their own inventory. That inventory is regulated with regards to where it can originate. It must come from, be purchased at wholesale. It comes from product manufacturers, cultivators, and other producers. However, they cannot take a product that's already been packaged and approved by the Cannabis Control Commission and then repackage it. However, they can white label materials that were not already packaged and labeled originally. And then once they can also not be delivering product if it hasn't been purchased. So these sales are typically done online. When a product is purchased, that's when the product gets loaded into a vehicle for delivery. And if that entity, if this business is located in Tyngsborough, it could be delivered to a Tyngsborough address, or it could be delivered to an address in any other municipality that allows marijuana retail. And when that sale takes place, the excise tax that gets generated comes back to the town. Also on this page, you'll notice that medical marijuana retailer has a definition that's struck out. That was an outdated definition and term that doesn't match the state regulations. So this article, as well as Article 18, include an amendment that corrects that language to replace it with medical marijuana treatment center, which is more in line with the state regulation language. This slide shows the table of uses, specifically about what marijuana-related businesses are allowed where. The changes, although there's a lot of lines and a lot of symbols here, the changes are in the I-1 column for the marijuana courier and the marijuana delivery operator, and those are the items that are underlined. Those two uses would not be allowed in any district except the I-1 district. This slide shows section 5.50.01 with some language crossed out. This was the language that was interpreted as prohibiting delivery. The language that would remain there is that outdoor cultivation is prohibited. At the bottom of this slide, section 5.50.09 has been amended in order to limit the number of these entities that would be located within town. So the same way that the town is limiting the number of retail locations to 2, this article, if passed, would limit the number of courier establishments and delivery operators to 2 each. The thought behind this was it's a good place to start for the community, leaving it completely wide open without limit. There's no way for us to know exactly what the market demand is going to be for those types of licenses. It gives the community an opportunity to get to know how those businesses operate, where they'll be located, and to be quite honest, it's possible that those numbers would be sufficient to serve our local needs. If it turns out that there is greater demand and there's potential additional revenue that the town could potentially generate, we can make an amendment and bring it back to town meeting if the community decides that they want to increase those numbers. All right, that's our explanation. This is the slide that basically defines or tries to explain marijuana delivery. Delivery, again, of marijuana is permissible by state regulations in any municipality that allows retail sales, and that activity itself cannot be prohibited by cities or towns. So this amendment is asking town meeting to consider whether the delivery businesses, courier, and delivery operator shall be allowed to apply for a special permit to locate in the town's I-1 industrial zone district. And I've just described the differences between the 2 types of delivery businesses. Both delivery license types, I'd like to point out, are regulated by the Cannabis Control Commission the same way that the retailers are. They're going to require the same types of requirements to get through the licensing process. They're going to have to apply for a host community agreement the way a retailer or a cultivator would, and they would have to apply and receive approval for a special permit before commencing any operations. Any questions about Article 17, which is to allow those 2 types of entities to locate within town? Article 18 will only be heard at town meeting if Article 17 fails. Article 18 was prepared by town council in order to help town meeting express its specific intentions for not passing 17. So people might assume that by not passing 17, that is effectively a prohibition on those 2 types of businesses in town, when in fact that is not the case. This article is to enable the town to explicitly express its desire to prohibit those businesses from locating within town. And if Article 18 does pass, it will also require a ballot question to be passed within a town election or at the ballot box. It is required to include the definitions for the 2 new uses if they're going to be prohibited, and it also includes the correction for the definition for medical marijuana treatment center. There's no other adjustments made to the bylaw in Article 18. Any questions about prohibiting those two types of businesses in town?
I guess I don't understand why we have Article 18. Is that a recommendation on the planning board, or was that a citizen petition, or?
It was a recommendation by town council simply because quite often the public can interpret the denial or the lack of or failing an article at town meeting as a prohibition when state law requires an explicit vote to prohibit it. So there's technically a chance. It's
So just in case there's a whole bunch of people that want to prohibit it, we're going to...
Well, if there's a whole bunch of people that want to prohibit those businesses from locating within town...
There are, okay.
Right. We would anticipate that Article 17 wouldn't pass in that particular case, and then Article 18 would be presented to town, and then we would presumably assume that that would pass. However, because it's a zoning change, it does require a 2/3 vote, so there's a slim chance that neither article passes, where the town would remain in limbo, and we would have to come up with ways to represent, different terms or other ways for the town to come to a consensus.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to start with a description on Article 19 before we get into some of the details. Article 19 deals with undersized lots in non-residential districts. That's in the B1, B2, B3, B4, and I1 zones. This article provides the planning board with discretion to provide dimensional relief, but only for lots that don't satisfy the minimum lot area requirements for the district where they're located, and only for uses that are already permissible by right or by special permit in that district. This is an important tool for a municipality that currently doesn't exist in Tyngsborough, since state statute makes it difficult for zoning boards of appeals to legally issue relief for insufficient lot area because of the criteria that they must measure against. By addressing the scenario through a special permit, it allows an elected board, the planning board, to consider individual applications and uses based on their zoning criteria. So each special permit that they issue is measured against the 4 criteria listed at the bottom of the screen. Is it in harmony and purpose with the intent of the bylaw? Will it be detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood? Is it appropriate for the site in question? And does it comply with the bylaw? There's approximately 100 to 120 parcels within town in non-residential districts that are undersized. There's a lot of them that people might not realize are undersized. These are just a handful of examples. And although some of them have businesses located on them already, some of them do not. This provides the town with an opportunity to consider specific development opportunities with a clear legal path forward in order for a special permit to be issued legally. These are some parcels within the I1 district. The previous slide was for the B3 district, where there's quite a few. And these are some, highlighted in orange, are some of the B2 district parcels along Kendall Road. So Article 19 specifically will provide the planning board discretion to issue a special permit to reduce any one or more dimensional requirements contained in the table of dimensional standards for any lots that do not have sufficient lot area. Are there any questions about this article? Great. I'll hand it back over to Matt or Dr. Flanagan.
Thank you, Eric. Great job explaining those articles. Appreciate it. Article 20 is a general bylaw amendment to our existing mandatory recycling bylaw. So again, this bylaw already exists, but the Mass DEP is requiring some additional language. Let me jump to the explanation here. So this article provides for a specific enforcement mechanism for mandatory recycling collection for waste haulers operating within the town of Tyngsborough. The Board of Health may issue fines to waste haulers that do not provide a recycling option to their customers. This bylaw update is required in order to continue to receive state grant funds through the Mass DEP Recycling Dividends Program, which we typically receive at least $6,000 to $7,000 a year, as well as some other grants through some different programs. So, for example, a first offense, they could receive a $100 fine, a second offense, a $200 fine, subsequent offenses would all be a $300 fine, and that would be like per day, would be per offense as these continued. So a type of offense would be, and again, I want to be very clear, this is for waste haulers only, which are required to be permitted through our Board of Health to operate here in the town, are required to either on their own provide a recycling option if they're providing solid waste pickup, or work with another company who's going to provide a recycling option to their customers. That's one of the biggest pieces. You can't offer just trash pickup without offering a recycling option, as well as the existing provision that there's now an enforcement and fine if it's not followed, that loads of refuse with greater than 5% by volume recyclables or compostable yard waste may not be picked up by the hauler. So if they're servicing a condominium and they have a dumpster there, or you hire one of the companies who's working with the town, one of the haulers for a dumpster in your yard for construction debris, and you fill it full of cardboard, that hauler is not allowed to take it away. They'll have to tell you you need to remove all of that cardboard from the dumpster because they're liable to get a fine. Again, you as the homeowner wouldn't get a fine, but if they were to collect it, they may get a fine. So it's an incentive to help the haulers with the enforcement to make sure that these recyclables are being properly taken care of. And again, this is really coming from very strong pressure from the DEP to have communities pass these additional regulations. Any questions regarding Article 20?
In recycling, the cover is supposed to be down, but yet you can go by and you'll see people who load the recycling way beyond the cover, and it's still collected. Is that part of the fines, the first offense?
No. Overflowing recycling that's in a recycling barrel intended for recycling is really a separate issue. The idea of the cover being up or fully closed is one we struggle with a lot. It's been sort of enforced more aggressively at different times. It's not directly related to this, but I'll just expound on that for just a minute. It can become difficult to enforce for several reasons. The companies have several different drivers, and some of them may interpret being fully closed or an inch closed a little bit differently. Some drivers were enforcing it more aggressively than others. And it does create a lot of headaches if somebody has too much garbage one week and then it's not picked up. Then they have even more the next week. And we've really, our focus is on education for residents, rather than not picking up their trash or recycling. So our focus at a high level is really just on the educational component.
These fines are for waste companies, not for residents, right?
Correct. Yeah, just the waste haulers, the Arrow, Republic, etc. They come annually to get permitted through our Board of Health in order to be able to operate within the community. So these fines are specific to the haulers only. All right, no more questions on 21. Article 20 was a general bylaw amendment to establish a fall special town meeting date. So this article will amend the town's general bylaws to add a section that establishes the fourth Tuesday in October as the date to be used, if possible, for the fall special town meeting. Historically, Tyngsborough has consistently held both a spring and a fall town meeting, and adding this as a bylaw will give residents advance notice to when the fall town meeting will take place. It's a very short bylaw, but there is an important provision. This does not prohibit the Selectmen from holding a special town meeting at any other time if required by law or due to the nature of the articles presented being time sensitive. Certainly things may come up that require the board to hold a special town meeting, but the idea is that by putting a standard date in our bylaws, it's going to give the most notice to our residents that we anticipate it's likely we're going to have a fall town meeting. This is when it is. Now you can plan your schedule around it if you're one of the diehards who makes every one of our town meetings. You're going to know when that is every year, unless we have to provide advance notice that it's going to be on a different
I
date.
got a question on town meeting. We usually, from the last 44 years I've been here, have the town election first.
Yes.
And then we have the town meeting after a week or two after the election. How come it's different this year?
It's different this year because in the fall, a bylaw was amended that basically changed those two dates, or it established that. Yeah. And the short reason being is so the Selectmen, Finance Committee, School Committee members who were here for the year, working on the year, developing the budget, recommending these warrant articles, developing the warrant articles, can be there at town meeting to speak to them and defend them and explain them. What could happen with the previous system is that the boards could go through all this work, we could develop the warrant together, and then I could have completely different boards sitting up there at the table as we're presenting the warrant articles who had no involvement, or maybe 40% of the board may have changed over and had no involvement with what's being presented to town meeting.
Thank you.
Article 22 is a maintenance and access easement at 9 Kendall Road. This article is authorizing the Board of Selectmen to formally accept a permanent easement across this parcel. I want to be very clear that this is only authorizing the Board of Selectmen to accept an easement if terms are come to. So town meeting only provides authorization to the Board of Selectmen. Actual easements are signed and authorized, or approved, I should say, by the Board of Selectmen. So I'll bring you back to that CPC article for the shared parking lot and the trails to the crypt. Portions of the shared parking lot, the driveway to access the tennis courts, and the crypt itself, as well as portions of the trails, are actually on 9 Kendall Road, which is private property, commonly known as the Farwell House. And we're in active negotiations for nominal cost, which essentially means no money, no monetary value, access to these two locations, the shared driveway as well as the historic crypt. So again, that's authorization only. We have a few easement items. Again, this is authorization to the Board of Selectmen to grant an easement to the Enclave, more commonly known as the Toll Brothers, which is a 55 and over housing development at 45 and 36 Sherburne Ave and 80 Pawtucket Boulevard, for the developer to install and maintain utilities and other required components of their project, including traffic and pedestrian safety measures on public land, and also to connect to a pump station on Curtis. It's on Curtis. All right. So we have a map here. The items highlighted and shown in red are where the scope of the easement will go. Again, the exact easement documentation and associated maps and bounds and whatnot will be approved by the Selectmen at a later date. This is just the authorization from town meeting to let them do that. We have 2 access easements related to Kendall Road, one at 93 Kendall Road and one at 87 Kendall Road. 93 Kendall Road is commonly known as the Brock's property. It's behind the Park and Ride. The owners of the Brocks are interested in developing that property at some point, or selling the property and putting a driveway in. However, there's existing driveways for the Park and Ride and the Tyngsborough Highway Garage. MassDOT, we've been in discussions with them, and they certainly don't want 3 driveways within feet of each other on such a busy road. And so the owners of 93 Kendall Road, the Brocks family, have approached us about creating a shared driveway, which would be much safer for all parties involved and really improve the sight lines. It would free up space on the Park and Ride property to add a little bit more parking because they wouldn't need such a long driveway. It would eliminate the driveway at the highway garage, allowing us to potentially expand and use more of our site. And basically the 3 parcels would use the one shared entrance. This would just authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept at no cost an easement to be able to use that driveway that is currently on the Brocks property, owned by the Brocks family. Questions there? Article 25, an easement across our property, is really just a backup option if needed, if for some reason MassDOT, through some type of permitting review or whatnot, were to not allow that shared driveway to take place. The owners of the Brocks property would be looking to come across the existing highway department garage. This would likely involve some type of monetary contribution or land swap or something else that would be negotiated by the Board of Selectmen to make this worthwhile. But again, the goal would be to ensure that there are not 3 driveways within very close proximity to each other along Kendall Road. So again, this is highly unlikely, but they do need access to their property, and in the event they run into trouble with the shared driveway on their property, they would like the ability to negotiate directly with the Board of Selectmen for some type of shared access across our property. Again,
Where is that road leading to?
the Brocks property is basically land that connects from the back of the Park and Ride to Middlesex Road behind where the new storage units went in. It's probably 40 acres, 20 dry,
That's a lot of.
25
wetland,
acres.
you know.
A lot of it is wet, but
Yeah.
it's basically that entire parcel. Yes, they do own another sliver with 100 feet of frontage along the other side, but it's essentially all wet behind that, and it's not buildable.
Now, they're going to enlarge in that parking lot.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that,
They're
Councilor?
going to enlarge in the big parking lot now.
If we were to do this option where they needed to come across our property, there would very likely be some type of negotiation that may involve something like that. But those discussions haven't even happened yet because this is really just a backup option.
Because when that was built, they never expected it to be filled like it is now. They never expected it to be filled like it is
The
now.
park and ride?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, under the preferred design option, there'd be close to 50 additional spots, between 40 and 50 additional spots at the park and ride. It wouldn't be just this entrance that's reconfigured. It would actually be the driveway along the back, according to the current proposed plans. The buses would enter at the westerly side, just come along the back, and then exit out the shared driveway, so they wouldn't have to loop around the property the way they do currently. They would come in the way they were originally intended, actually, and then leave through the shared driveway. Any more questions? Article 26 and 27 come from the Board of Assessors. Article 26 will allow the Board of Assessors to increase the property tax exemption granted to eligible seniors on the basis of age, income, and assets by 33%, which essentially brings the current exemption of $750 up to $1,000 in fiscal year 23 and beyond. Any questions? Great. And one more. Article 27 would authorize the Board of Selectmen to increase the annual abatement maximum from $1,000 to $1,500 per year as part of the town's senior tax work-off program, which is a tax relief program that allows eligible seniors to perform a certain number of hours of work in the town departments in return for an abatement on their property tax bill. It's a very popular and very successful program. We have 15 seniors every year who participate across various town departments. Article 28 is the middle school debt authorization. This is the last town-sponsored article on the warrant. We'll very briefly go through 4 citizen petitions after this, but I'd like to invite Dr. Flanagan up to the podium to kick us off. Thank you, Dr. Flanagan.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mike Flanagan, Tyngsborough Public Schools Superintendent. So we have approximately 30 slides. I will not go into depth on all of them, I promise, but I'm going to hit some key highlights and certainly answer any questions you have along the way. I think it's important to understand that this project is a community project. Through the work of the Board of Selectmen, certainly the school committee, we established a school building committee, which has representation from all the boards in town as well as community at-large members. So we have 15-member Tyngsborough School Building Committee, and they were tasked really with looking at what we need for a school in the district and making some pretty important decisions. Project Milestones, the history behind this, we started submitting statements of interest to the MSBA back in 2011. It took us 8 years to be invited into the pipeline. We were invited in 2019 for a core project, and we're at the point now where we're 5 days away from making a decision on moving forward. It's also important to know that in 2020 at town meeting, $950,000, a maximum of $950,000 was authorized to expend for a schematic design and feasibility study at that point. The work of the school building committee, we've had over 47 public meetings, we've had 4 public forums, we've done community mailers, we've blasted social media, so we've done everything we can to get the word out there about this project. This is an important question. This has come up a lot. Why are we developing a school for 480 students? Currently, we have just under 400 students in the Tyngsborough Middle School. This number was given to us by the MSBA. We learned of what the number was going to be to design for when we went into Boston about 2 years ago. We had to, as a community, submit number of females in town, projected birth rates in town, available land that can be developed in town, historical trends and building permits. All that was submitted to the MSBA. They took that information, they ran their own longitudinal study and analysis, and they came back to us and said, The number that you need to design for is 480 students. So that was given to us by the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, who's partnering with us on this project. These are the guiding principles. Essentially, we had community forums where anyone could come and offer insight and opinions about what they wanted to see in the Tyngsborough Middle School. These are the 6 guiding principles that came about in our educational program. We had to develop, as a school system, an educational program that reflects what we do in Tyngsborough. And that had to be approved by both the MSBA and DESE. And we had to design a facility that met the needs of that educational program. These were the guiding principles in that program. This is the schematic design space summary. This essentially is a slide for the architects to talk about what type of school we designed to meet our programming on the ed program that I just talked about on the previous slide. This is an important slide as well. People need to know that we studied several locations in town. We did look at potentially siting the school on the elementary school campus. We looked at several options on the Norris Road campus. Chief Russell and Chief Howe both had input into what they thought would be best as well. It's important to know that when you partner with the MSBA, you have to submit 3 projects. You have to show them a facility upgrade to your current facility. You have to show them an addition renovation and a potential new project. So we looked at all these, the school building committee made some decisions and came up with new construction being the most appropriate for this community. This is just an overview shot of where the school is going to sit. Basically, it's on that dirt field that's currently between the high school and the middle school. There's a floor plan of the school. Talks about our classroom neighborhoods, our 2 teams of 4. More schematic design, second floor. This would be the entrance to the school. This would be a rendering looking at it from essentially the bus drop-off area at the high school. It's a courtyard. This courtyard, right now, the direct outlet look would be just over Pierce Field, would be just over that, in those trees in the background. This is a cafeteria / performing arts center. It's a cafetorium is what it is, similar to what we have at the elementary school. MSBA does not reimburse for auditoriums in middle schools. So we know that theater is big in our community, and that came through loud and clear as we had our envisioning sessions. So this was the cafetorium that was designed so that we could still hold middle school performances. It's a backwards look through it. Sure.
The room there, is it for 480 kids?
Yes.
Seating?
This will seat 200 kids for 3 different lunches that we have. So that's the cafeteria right there. Yeah, we're showing this rendering right now is in performance mode. Typically, you would see cafeteria tables in there. Again, just another view of that. This is a black box flexible performing space. This could be shared by both the high school and the middle school right now. Again, I think theater came through loud and clear in the ed visioning session, so this is an opportunity for us to have this appropriate space for our kids to perform. This is a band room. Currently, if you don't know, right now our middle school students walk over to Tyngsborough High School to participate in band. We do not have a band room in the current middle school. Here's an appropriate gym for our kids with bleachers. I would say the bleachers are very similar to what exists at Tyngsborough Elementary School. This is a regulation-sized court with an appropriate runoff on each end. Anyone who's been in the middle school now knows that the walls are extremely close to the court and the court is undersized. Another rendering of the classroom neighborhoods. This would be the heart of a team, so this would be a common area for teachers and students to collaborate on each team level, on each grade level, on each team. Typical classroom, flexible furniture, flexible seating. Science lab, typical science lab, again, movable furniture, everything can be arranged accordingly. It's important to note now that some of our science classrooms are really just classrooms with sinks, so they're not appropriate for what we need to do for our students. This is the STEM classroom. We talk about this all the time, but our STEM lesson planning is contingent upon the weather because our kids have to go outside to use some of the equipment that they need because we just don't have the room in the school. So this is an appropriate room that will allow for design and creation. Conceptual project schedule. I think it's also important, we don't have a slide on it here, but to note that throughout the entire construction phase, our students at TMS will not be displaced. So the first part of the project would be pull down the old gymnasium and the catwalk that connects to school. Our students would still be able to go to school throughout the entire construction project and not be disrupted. The only thing they would have to do is go over to Tyngsborough High School to take wellness classes or phys ed classes. And right now, the projected schedule has completion of this in April of 2025, with the full project being completed, including raising the current middle school and all the final landscape in 2026. The proposed cost is $82.5 million. The anticipated MSBA grant is just over $28 million, so it's a $54 million cost to the community. And Matt, I'm going to turn this back to you for the tri-board recommendation and funding. I'll stay.
The tri-board, consisting of the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, and Finance Committee, have met throughout the process. We're waiting, anticipating the final number, and so they could discuss how this was going to be funded. We were happy, both Dr. Flanagan and I are on the Middle School Building Committee. By state statute, we have to be there. That our estimate that we came back with 2 years after we came through the process was very, very close to our initial estimate. At every one of our meetings, we told the architects we wanted, obviously, the school that fit our children, but also one that was fiscally responsible. Really, in addition to that goal, the tri-board, the final plan that was discussed over several meetings is that the tri-board will recommend to town meeting $1 million per year of the construction debt service to be funded within the existing operating budget. To meet this goal, the tri-board is going to recommend a budget town meeting that earmarks portions of new growth from several large residential and commercial projects over the next 5-10 years to meet that goal. Thankfully, there's a 2.5 year to 3 year construction phase, which allows us, as soon as we know this project is approved next week, and then 2 weeks after that, we can start planning for this debt service. We put together as a tri-board a 10-year plan to build up approximately $100,000 per year on average. So in 10 years' time, we'll have that $1 million per year, and we have reserves and other funding that we can supplement. So when that debt service comes in at about year 5, between year 5 and year 10, as soon as the debt service starts in year 5, we'll be able to be funding that $1 million per year out of the operating budget. It's going to be about a third of the new incremental debt service we're looking to fund within the operating budget. What does that mean for the average taxpayer? It brings the full tax impact down to about a 6.21%. I like using the percentage because when we say average tax bill, that could mean something very different. For the average person, it will be $413 per year, so about $34 per month. However, you can look at your existing tax bill now and pretty easily, hopefully, do a 6.2% increase on your particular tax bill, and you'll know your number. It may be $500 if you have a really nice house, or if you haven't, if you live in a slightly smaller house, it might only be a $200 or $300 tax increase. So use that 6.2% number if you're trying to figure out your own tax impact. And the failed vote policy, did you want me to discuss that as well? Again, very different from a project that, actually, Dr. Flanagan, you were here longer, so maybe you want to discuss how that's changed.
So those of us who have been in town a while understand that when we built the elementary school in 2002, it opened in 2003, that was under the SBA process. The SBA is different than the MSBA. The MSBA didn't come into play until 2005. Basically, we know when we voted for the elementary school, it took 3 votes in this community for it to finally pass. With the MSBA process, you have 1 shot. If you aren't successful with this vote, you have to resubmit a statement of interest and you go back to the end of the line. Historically, what we're seeing right now is that could be 6 to 10 years out before you're invited back into the process. So we're talking at least another generation of students. So it's critical that we get a 2/3 vote at town meeting and that we have a successful vote on the 17th.
Is that number, that $82 million, is that a turnkey number? When you put the key in the door and open it, it's ready to go. No furnishings or anything. What happens to the furnishings that are in the school now? They're going to be thrown out?
Salvage and repurpose what we can in the other schools, in the other district. But I mean, we've been very conservative with our spending in the middle school for the past 10 years since we've been submitting the statements of interest with the MSBA. We've been hopeful that this day would come, so we've kind of held off on upgrading some of the equipment we have there. Yes.
Is it true that they just put a new elevator in the middle school?
Is it true that we have no elevator at the middle school?
A new elevator in the middle school.
We have 2 elevators at the middle school right now that are both functioning.
Was one just put in?
No.
Oh, I heard that there was one.
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. We had a few additional slides here that are just for backup. When you pick up your packet, you can review it, but these are more to answer questions that people may have about reimbursement rates, et cetera, et cetera. There are 4 home rule petitions. I'm going to just note the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee did not make recommendations on these. We will not be recommending their approval at town meeting, but certainly the citizens who brought them forward may make a request to the moderator that town meeting take action on them. The first is a citizen petition for home rule petition to authorize the legislature to pass legislation to exempt the Tyngsborough Water District's proposed River Road well. Actually, I need to update this slide. Basically, to allow more water to be provided to the Tyngsborough Water District. That's why I do the pre-town meeting. Article 30 is a citizen petition regarding early voting that would reject and essentially overturn the fall of 2021 special town meeting vote that would provide permission to the Board of Selectmen to file special legislation with the General Court to establish no excuse absentee voting and early voting in our municipality. So this is an effort to overturn the legislation that we currently have working through the State House that will ultimately, when approved, hopefully later this year, allow the town to do no excuse absentee voting and early voting in our municipal elections. Again, it's already done in our state elections, but the state is not currently allowing it. Article 30 is looking to overturn that, though. Article 31, a citizen petition. I'll let residents read this on their own time, would place numerous requirements on individuals trying to do absentee voting here in the community. Article 32 is a voter ID citizen petition to see if the town will vote to require all voters to validate his or her identity with a government-issued photo ID to vote both in person or by absentee ballot. And it would further seek to request the Board of Selectmen to file special legislation to require all voters to present voter ID, require any Massachusetts state ID to clearly identify the status of United States citizenship, and to remove non-photo ID options such as utility bills, bank statements, or paychecks. Again, these articles are not from the town, but they are citizen petitions. Right. I do want to note and remind everyone that town meeting is going to be held on May 3rd, 7 p.m. at Tyngsborough High School at 36 Norris Road. We hope to see you there. Also, if you would like more information, visit TyngsboroughMiddleSchoolProject.com. If you've received the paper pamphlet in the mail or you have a copy of this, you can scan the QR code. A lot of great information at that website. Tyngsborough Middle School is also hosting some building tours. The next upcoming building tour is April 30th at 9 a.m. And the Tyngsborough Town election, Tuesday, May 17th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you'd like more information on the town election, please visit tyngsboroughma.gov. That concludes our pre-town meeting this Thursday, April 28th, and we look forward to seeing you all on May 3rd. Thank you, and have a great evening.